So, welcome back to another TSP Masterclass, looking at doing things a little bit differently tonight. Been some fantastic things that we've all learned over the last few weeks with players and coaches from the professional game. So what we're going to try and do tonight is bring some of those learnings together, look at how we can implement those in trainings when we're training by ourselves or training with a friend or family member. So before we get into it, so joined tonight by Warren Grieve, Football New South Wales Technical Director. Warren, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Andrew Fearnley, Regional Development Manager and the Country State Team Coach. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Drew.
Good. And Phil Myall, TSP North Metro Coach and Metro State Team Coach. How are you?
Good, mate. Good. Hello to everyone.
So just to get us started, from what we know about the training that you guys are doing, and we've heard a lot over the past few weeks about the need to be doing more football, but we know that everybody already is doing a lot of football, averaging somewhere between sort of 8 and 15 hours of organised football training a week. That then outside of school, the majority of what's going on is with a family member or on your own. About 75% of the additional training is either on your own or with one other person. And that we're getting around 6 hours of that on average. And so one of the things that we've sort of taken away is that while it would be great for everybody to train more and spend more time outside, we also understand that where it's not always as easy as just fitting more time into a day. So part of what we want to do is look around where individual practice and practice with one other person fits for us all at the moment, when we're in lockdown, but also when we come back out of that. And that is the kind of situations where you're going to be doing your extras that help you to develop on top of what you're doing in your team or school environment. So look, let me come to you first, Phil, and ask you this. Out of the last few weeks, what are a couple of the really key things that you've taken from some of the professional players?
Yeah, so if we sort of think about what's the last sort of 5, is it? And we talk about the common themes that have gone through it. I think the number one has to be that as a football player, if you want to make it, you've got to take responsibility for your own development. Number of them have mentioned, extra practice, just having a ball and a wall, and just putting the extra hours in, just not relying on a coach or a team just to be the sole focus of your development. You have to actually go out and do stuff yourself. If I look at my notes, resilience was another one that came through. I don't think any single one of those players that we've spoken to has just gone straight into the from academy into a first team and then without taking any hits somewhere. So that was a big one. And that sort of leads you to taking the opportunities and being ready to take opportunities when they arise. I think that, again, I remember Spencer talking about he was 17, 18, and he just all of a sudden got an opportunity and he took it and he went with it. And I think Burnsy is similar. He just got given an opportunity out of the blue and he just went with it. There was a few others that I wrote down about, playing multiple positions. Multi-sports is another one as well. Lloyd was very big, wasn't he, on athletics? And Birighitti mentioned AFL, and Spencer was mentioned athletics as well. So not being sort of closed off to doing other sports, I think, is one of those key messages as well.
Yeah, great. I think another one that I've taken as well is that a few of them changed positions as they went through, but there are some key fundamental parts of the game that need to be practiced on your own, and it doesn't matter what position you wind up in, they're going to be important. I guess that's some of the things that we'll start to investigate tonight some more. So, Warren, if we come across to you as you're looking at that, apart from just saying first touch, what are some of the key techniques required as you watch through that video?
Yeah, it's when you look at that particular video and how long that video goes for, it's only a real snapshot. And as we move through the videos tonight, there's some longer ones, there's some shorter ones. But what you will notice is that everything that we discuss is intertwined. So whether it's first touch, striking the ball, running with the ball, finishing on goal, etc., as we move through, they're all in there at some point. So what's great about watching these clips and where we are as coaches, then hopefully what we're hoping to achieve with the players is to try and keep it what we call objective, in terms of keeping it the realistic, so having that realism there. So if you just took this screenshot and have a look at what players are in the picture, where are those players on the pitch, and then what is it you want from first touch, and what do we want from individuals in terms of where they're receiving the ball. And when we talk about purposeful practice, it's where you're going to receive the ball, one, but two, to get a successful outcome, and judging ourselves on those successful outcomes. And in this particular instance, certainly around first touch, we want as often as possible players to be able to face forward on their first touch. So it's not even about taking the first touch, it's about how do you actually get yourself in a position where you can take the first touch to position yourself to face forward and then get a successful outcome from that. And that might just be as simple as playing a pass into a teammate, either into their feet or into space. So if you look at this and where it is on the field, we're getting close to the final third, where you're hoping to get an end product. So that might be with the back four in this particular picture here, playing the ball through, first touch, receive, face forward, play a killer pass in behind to put a player in a goal scoring position. So when you're thinking about your practice as individuals, that might be something that you actually look at. So if you just stop it, freeze and have a look at which players are involved, and then how can you start to recreate these types of scenarios and the types of first touch you want in this particular situation. And if you just look at, again, so it's final third, but it might be in the back third or the middle third. So if you can do this now through your own eyes and what you're starting to see in your own lens as a player, what does it mean to you in the position that you're actually playing in? Where do you currently feel you actually sit with your first touch? Do you give yourself the best opportunity when you're receiving the ball to play in the future, see something before it actually happens, open your body up to be able to play forward passes, just as an example?
Yeah, brilliant. And look, I've got a good question there from Kaylin that's come through us already, which is brilliant, basically saying, I know that I can use juggling to improve first touch, but how else can we do it? Which is super, because I guess it's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'll come across to this next slide, but before we do, it's probably worth also thinking about what happens before you take a first touch. And I know, thinking back, I think it was Nahuel was talking about the importance of scanning. So probably as well within it, a first touch isn't just a first touch, isn't it? It's kind of trying to, within these practices, replicate some of the realism.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's important to break it down and really keep it simple if you can. So the sort of things I look for, even when I was a player, ball, opposition, target, space. Where's the ball? Where's the opposition? Potentially, where's the target that if you receive the ball, you want to play that pass into, and around where's the opposition? So how do you actually put yourself in a great position to be able to receive the ball in between defenders, beyond defenders, where you're actually going to take that first touch to open teams up, depending on what position you actually play in as well.
Yeah, great. So if we go through these, if we start with this one, practicing on the right here, so practicing by themselves with a one, maybe just talk us through it and the things that, so apart from just playing it off the wall, what's the detail around what they might be looking to do?
Yeah, if you go back to your original question to Phil earlier on, it was around what have we learned from the 5 previous presentations, and a lot of them also said that all you need is a ball and a wall. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that, than just having a ball and a wall. And I think back again to my time as a player and developing myself and having that intrinsic motivation to be the best version of myself on the field was certainly, I lived in a council area back in the UK, and I was actually fortunate to actually have 2 walls back to back, so I could practice in the street with a ball. So these pictures, if you take number 1 as the example at the bottom of the screen there, the big white rectangle, that represents your wall, and you might not have access to a pitch. You might not have access to markers or defenders. And certainly right now, when you're training under the current circumstances, you can either only train on your own, or you can train with a friend or a parent or a guardian. So trying to set scenarios whereby it is realistic to the game. So the way that I like to get the message across is, if you take the top picture as a screenshot, so we've taken that from a game that you've just seen the highlights from earlier on, and then potentially where passes are going to come from, and then where are you going to position yourself to receive the ball. So this is just a really, really simple session whereby if you've got a wall or a rebound wall, you're able to play into that rebound wall. Depending on where the ball goes to, how do you then position yourself, as I said to earlier on, either beyond those markers, or can you come short to receive it in front of those markers, but trying as often as possible to be able to receive the ball facing forward on your first touch, to then be able to hopefully have an end product. And if you are training on your own, once you've opened up, you've taken that first touch facing forward, depending on where it is between those three markers that actually represent the defenders, you might just get a finish on a goal, or there might be a target that you can actually use. A saying that Phil likes to use, and I'll steal it from him now, jumpers for goalposts, is a scenario where it's as simple as that. So if you just you've got your jumpers, you put them down, you don't have markers, but you've got a ball and a wall, that number one is a really simple session to either receive on your first touch in front of the defenders or beyond the defenders. And likewise, if you're training with a partner, even better, or with a friend, and what you can actually do is be really creative, but just base it on the scenario. So I guess our challenge is, and it's a great question to see what the Socceroos game is, to tomorrow night will be, but if you're watching it through a different set of glasses now, and you was to actually stop it at any given time, and you were looking to this particular core skill of first touch, where do players take their first touch? What is their awareness? Where's the ball? Where's the opposition? Where's the target in the space? Are they able to get into positions between lines where there's no defenders around them because they are scanning? So they have that perception, they're able to make a decision. And ultimately, when it comes to actually executing that technique of receiving the first touch and facing forward, they're putting themselves in the best position to get a successful outcome in striking the ball. And that might be into a player's feet, into space, or into the back of the net, however you set those scenarios up. So there's so much you can actually do with it as an individual, but as we talk to it, it's purposeful practice, because you've taken it from some objective evidence and the footage that you actually watched as a player and as an individual, and bringing it back into your own training environment.
Now, I guess there's probably a temptation when we're talking first touch to play it against the wall and then take the touch back towards the wall as a standard kind of a setup and bounce it off, which will work first touch, but more often than not, we probably want to take our touch away from where the ball came from in the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you go to number one, that the temptation would be able to do that, to just go up against the wall and continuously, with repetition, just bounce the ball back to the wall and strike. As I said, take first touch, set yourself, get balance, and then play the ball back in. But when you look at the game and the realism of the game, once you're receiving the ball, certainly as you move through the thirds of the field, it is to face forward and be able to play forward. And if you look to the type of brand of football we're looking to play, we want to be proactive, we want to be creative, but more importantly, we want to be effective with the play as well. So we see that as a negative touch potentially if you play straight back. So how often do you put yourself in scenarios or situations where, if possible, there is space behind you, you've recognized the space behind you, you can take that first touch facing forward, either dribble into a target, play into a target, move the ball around, certainly on your own, and then bring yourself back to that starting position.
Yeah, brilliant. Before we'll go into dribbling and passing in a second, but I guess last one to you is, and think about Kaylin's question there, in terms of developing the first touch, so not just where it goes, but also how far it goes, would you suggest that each time the ball comes back, they try to sort of visualize where a defender might be and what kind of touch they're going to try and take? So sometimes it might be a long touch, sometimes it might be a short touch, sometimes they might want to try and kill it dead and then turn within these practices?
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly would agree with Kaylin in terms of juggling is absolutely fantastic to improve your first touch. But you could even then start to how many juggles do you have? And then once you've actually got yourself into a position where you can face forward, where do you take it from? So you're changing the height in terms of where the ball's dropping from to be able to take that first touch, but recognizing where the space is behind you and where the target is, more importantly. And if you base it off of a target that you ultimately want to hit, that's your end outcome. So how do you put yourself in positions as often as possible to be able to get that repetition from the height of the ball dropping down, take the first touch and then play it into a certain area and then start again?
Yeah, I think back to Mabiel's goal where Trent Sainsbury played it over his shoulder the other day, and he brings it down, and there might be something in that. You bounce it off a wall and then turn, it comes over your shoulder, and that's what your first touch looks like. That takes you forward. So many ways that they can adjust it off these couple of basics. So, Andrew, if we come off those ones, and I guess as a starting point, what's some of the key things that you're seeing there in terms of the dribbling and the passing?
I think just to reiterate what Warren said about players facing forward, it was quite evident quite often that a lot of the players, when they receive the ball, get in a position quickly to face forward, which allows them to see what's in front of them, which is important for them to be able to make the decision based on what they do see in front of them. So either they're facing forward already, or they quickly get themselves into a position to face forward so they can make a decision. And then the dribbling component changes a little bit. The last goal that we didn't see from Paderborn was some creative dribbling with 1v1 skill that beats a player to finish, whereas other times you can see they've attacked space because there's space to be able to go past the defender to dribble past. And then it's not always necessarily about dribbling into a duel as such, into a 1v1, because you can quite often see that they've taken a defender away from the space they're in, which has allowed them to then play a forward pass, which was something that was consistent in there. And the scanning is quite important for the pass. If you can't see what's in front of you, it's very difficult to pick the moment to make that pass, because quite often the passes come after a run. They've seen the run, the ball's played into the path of the player with good weight, and quite often we saw that it was in between defenders, which put the defensive team under a lot of pressure because they've taken defenders out at key moments, and that was important. But even though it's dribbling and passing, it is quite important that the body position of the player to face forward is there as well. Yeah,
I guess that reinforces that idea of linking whatever it is that you're practicing to what actually comes before and after within a game situation. If I think just to what often practicing dribbling might look like, it might be sort of a row of cones or a set of cones and dribbling in and out of them multiple times. I think it's probably fair to say that no practice is going to be bad practice, but do you think that kind of dribbling in and out in a pattern is the optimal way to train it?
No, I think it's a bit like the juggling. It's going to assist first touch for sure, but dribbling through straight cones is going to help you with dribbling, but it's not realistic to the game. It's not often you get a row of 3 to 4 defenders in a line that you're taking on. It's not like that. So it'd be a bit more beneficial if you're putting cones out, that it was a bit more randomized and it looked a bit more like chaos, so that if you took the screenshot there, if he was dribbling, it wouldn't be in a straight line. He'd be breaking through the line, and then there'd be a defender on a different angle that he'd be trying to dribble past or take on.
Yeah, I think that's right. And before we go to the practices, I guess one of the other bits that's important as well is with dribbling and then linking that to passing, it's around players getting their head up, as we mentioned, but it's also when to get your head up as well. So head down probably on the touch as you take it past something, but then head back up. And also, is it actually the head coming up and down? It's probably more the eyes, right? And getting the head in a space. So are those things that we're trying to look to do within our practices as well as the actual dribbling?
Yeah. Definitely, for sure. And that's being able to pick up on the cues, like when the supporting player makes the run, what direction are they running in, what side of the defender are they, how much distance do you have between defenders to be able to try and thread a ball, what part of the foot can you use. I think there was one, the Sydney FC players come inside by dribbling, and then he's played on the outside of his right foot between, two defenders because the opportunity presented to do it.
Yeah, super. So let's have a look at these couple of practices that you've put together here, and maybe you can just talk us through the ideas and then how they relate to what you're talking about.
So the first one's the whites, resembling a wall. But if you're not allowed to use the wall at your parents' house, I mean, it could be a little goal or the jumpers theory that we're all stealing from Phil here. But again, moving away from just running in a line of cones, we're starting in a box where the player can vary how they're dribbling in there. It could be some cuts, it could be some step overs, it could be driving, attacking the space. And then once the player's out, it's making the pass. So in this situation by yourself, it's hitting the wall. And then what's important when you've made a pass is obviously support the ball. So once we've played the pass, there's a forward movement to recollect the ball for the return.
And I guess with that one, in terms of that box and dribbling inside it, and like you talked about there, you could potentially do it with practicing some tricks or skills, or potentially running towards the box. And if there was a bunch of obstacles inside the box and you're just trying to slay them through it and go a different way through each time, head up, head down, and changes the speed, it probably just changes what the practice looks like as well. And then just looking at that there, when it then comes back off the wall, I guess it links nicely to what Warren was talking about before, that you're going to try and get on the half turn and then explode away back round to start again, right? Yeah.
So again, the focus might just be on the dribbling and passing, but the other elements should be in the practice for it to be as real as possible. So for sure. And then with a friend, we're looking at the ball being played to the player. So again, body position to face forward. First touch is involved, but then it's the same about the dribbling in the box. So whether it's attacking space, whether there can be some random cones in there, and then the pass is looking at the supporting players run. So that's important. And then, are you playing space? Are you playing their feet? And that's what you need to see when you're dribbling. So if you've dribbled to the edge of the box, you're not going to see the runner. It's probably a bit late. So what you referred to earlier about more so the eyes of the player getting up and having a look, that's an important cue for the player on the ball.
Yeah, excellent. I guess again, it probably changes away from that idea of just dribbling for the sake of getting better at dribbling, and a bit like a first touch. Dribbling's not the outcome of our game, is it? It's a means to an end, which is ultimately, whether it's you or somebody else, the ball's going to try and end up in the goal.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So what about any other detail around when they're thinking about dribbling or passing? What's going to be the little bits that are the difference between just doing the practice and it being really meaningful?
I think being able to vary the delivery of the pass is important for the player, and being able to experiment for the player is important because the only way players are going to get better at being creative or playing in a proactive way is to take some risk in there and accept that it might not always come off. So I think they've got to be prepared to be brave when they play and try new things that they wouldn't normally do. Yeah,
I guess that's both feet, different parts of the feet.
Yeah.
Pass on the floor, passes with the outside of the foot, and again, look, thinking back to the game, is this something where they should probably be trying to visualize what would actually be happening in the game? So, for example, if you were dribbling in a game and you knew the pressure was coming from one side, you might be getting your arm out to protect. What are your thoughts around that? And does that start to add some extra realism to the practices?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's got to be some intent on what they're doing when doing any of these practices. So for sure, it's why am I dribbling in here? Am I beating a player because I'm in the middle of the pitch and it's able for me to take him on and create an overload? Is it from a wide area because I'm taking on a wide defender? Or am I am I able to, like you said, use my arm to push off the defender because there's space that I can exploit? So it's got to be real in what they are doing, and they've got to have some visualization about the purpose of why they're doing it. And also in the last part, when you're playing the pass, is where's the defenders? What kind of a ball am I playing? Am I bending this around defender? Am I playing it on the ball side of the defender? Is it in behind? Is it to the feet of the player that I'm playing it to? So there's got to be some visualization around the purpose of the ball that we're playing as well.
Yeah, and I guess this again can be adapted just like a first touch one towards the position that player's playing. So if you're playing as a centre back, it might be that you're visualizing driving through and then playing into the feet of a 10, which maybe looks slightly different to some of these videos where it's a number 10 sliding a number 9 in, but the same idea of dribbling with intent, ball under control, and setting up whatever the next action's going to be, whether that's pass, shoot, or take somebody on. So as you're watching those ones, Warren, but obviously not just related to that, but that's Thomas Deng at the Olympics, who was one of the more outstanding defenders for Australia, but still a player who is developing. What are the key things that you're seeing?
Yeah, so again, it's the what and the where. If we talk to the defending, who and the when, so the who's obviously Deng in this particular scenario, and you look at a couple of these actions, these individual football actions, but the way that they were set up as a team, they were set up tactically to do certain things in certain areas of the field. And if you look at the principles of defending as a whole, you're looking at potentially delay, pressure, cover, support, and then how do you relate that to the individual? And if you look at Deng and how comfortable he is because he's aware of what's around him, and when we talked to the first touch previously, you talk about ball, opposition, target, space. I think a lot of the time, both as coaches and as players, we get too ball centric. So we just look at the ball and that's it. But I think when we're actually looking at defending and all other areas of the game, you have to look at the bigger picture and look beyond just what's around the ball. So if you take a target practice, the ball is actually the bullseye. But if you then go around that and around that again, it becomes like a dartboard. But then you start to see beyond where the ball is. And then you're starting to anticipate as a defender where you need to position yourself best to be able to, again, get successful outcomes. So when is the right time to delay? When is the right time to apply the pressure or to actually drop off? When do you give cover to a teammate that might be in a better position to apply the pressure? And then how do you support as a unit? And if you break that down and you look at his football actions in this particular really short video, there's so much you can do from an individual technique perspective to improve yourselves and look at it again. And when we go back to that objective evidence that I talked to, this is a game, like you said, in the Olympics where he was a standout player because of the football actions he was able to make, not just when he received the ball and when he was on the ball, but anticipating when was the right time to actually intercept, get on the ball, and either step in front of the defender to receive the ball and pinch it off of his toes, or just to get touch tight and let the attacking player know that he's there. And it wouldn't even sometimes be about tackling. And sometimes the best defenders don't need to tackle because they're just putting themselves in a position where they apply the pressure, and then the attackers have to make a negative pass, which is back and away from goal. And ultimately, the art of defending, regardless whether it's in the front third, middle third, or back third, is to stop them from getting the ball into your net. So what's your individual role and responsibility? In this particular instance, he's playing as a centre-back, and then what's the roles and responsibilities for him? But I would be thinking everyone on this call might not just be a centre-back, but what does defending mean to you? How do we actually defensively transition quickly, individually, and then how do we actually put ourselves in positions where we don't necessarily need to win the ball, but we can force the opposition to take negative touches away from our goal?
Yeah, I guess, again, when we look at what might typically go on, there might be people think, well, defending is going to be difficult to practice alone, because a lot of people look at defending as tackling. But as you've said there, a lot of the top defenders, their key thing is just don't let the person get past you, and to be able to read and anticipate. And then as we go across here, the other bit that I look at there when I was looking at is after he does some great defensive work, his next pass actually goes to the opposition both times. So we talk about the link, but there's probably something as well in, well, yes, we're going to defend in these sessions that you've put together, but then there probably needs to be a next really positive, good action to take it to the next level. So talk us through what we've got here and how some of that detail comes to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you draw the links together, it's about ultimately getting the successful outcome. So it's one thing to be proactive in your actual defending and doing a great job, but if you've done all of that hard work defending, why would you then just send the ball straight away and give it back to them and put yourself in a position where you've got to defend again? So how do you actually ensure there's always, doesn't matter whether it's defending, first touch, dribbling or passing, which we've talked to already, it's about that successful outcome, and how do you actually judge yourself as an individual and getting those successful outcomes? And with this particular one here, if you look at the session number 1 on the right hand side of your screen, and then the screenshot at the top, I've talked to there, again, taking it from that screenshot. When's the right time to apply pressure? When's potentially the right time to drop off and get yourself into a defensive position and delay, because there's already pressure on the ball. So you can see that the defensive midfielders actually come in, applied that pressure. Do you need to apply the pressure? Potentially not. So then you can drop off, get yourself into a position where you are in a position where if they do win the ball, you potentially become the outlet, and you haven't had to only defend, but you've got yourself in a position where your next first touch is actually going to be a positive one and be able to play that ball forward. So then if you take that screenshot and then go to the actual diagram at the bottom, again, the white rectangle will actually represent the wall, and they've got a goal behind them as well. You might not have that. You might just be in your backyard. You might only have a small wall to be able to hit, but how do you actually start to visualize, again, like you say, and put targets into your practices that you have to hit? So once you've actually done the defensive job really well, you're now putting yourself in a position where there's always something off the back of that as well. So you've got yourself into the position where you either can now step in front and pinch the ball beyond the 3 markers that are in that bottom picture there, and how do you then, or potentially drop off, and then once the ball comes back, you're able to receive the ball but actually hit the target again and move yourself around those defenders that potentially are just markers or jumpers or something that is there that gives you an opportunity to understand the timing of your run, when to actually arrive on touch, when to drop off, get yourself into a position where you provide that cover, and then when the ball eventually does come back to you or pops back out, what is it you want in that given instance? And again, here, if you go to number 2 and you look at that session there, and to your point that you discussed or you just mentioned earlier on, Drew, was around when he actually won the ball. In that top picture on the left hand side, he actually wins the ball and plays the ball long, and it goes straight back to the attacking team, and now we're defending again. So how do you develop that where you're going to get that successful outcome? So in the bottom picture there on the left hand side, this is now working with a goalkeeper potentially, or a teammate. Doesn't have to be a goalkeeper. Again, it might just be someone there, and that player then plays the ball into the wall or the target or a rebounder, whatever you have available to you to be able to allow you to do that, to get that action, to get that repetition, depending on where the ball comes off. Again, you as the defender now, you as Den now, are either stepping in to win the ball in front of the markers and pinch it off their toes, or you're actually dropping off and receiving it. And then if he was to progress this one as number 2, furthermore, if you look to the top of the screen there, and if you take your cursor there on the white arrow pointing forward, when he wins the ball, and you can see the black arrow down the bottom, and then it gets it, drags the ball up, plays the ball up the field. To progress this session on, it might be that you actually move the goalkeeper and you put him on the other side of the wall, and that's the target that you actually have to hit. So it might be you as the player drive the ball into the wall at different heights. It might be a lofted pass, it might be a driven pass low, depending on how that ball comes back to you and how you actually defend either in front of those markers or actually drop off to receive that ball. You might play the long one in, but if you put the goalkeeper behind that white arrow at the top of the screen where the white player is there at the top, plays the ball in, now you've got to drive that ball into him, and every time you get the ball into that area once you've driven it in behind the arrow on the other side of the halfway line, Drew, then that's a successful outcome. So getting it into that area there, now the player gets a good first touch and will drive that ball back in, and that might be now you have to assess the flight of the ball and how do you actually take a proactive first touch. Is it coming in the air? So it might be a header, so you're arriving at the right time to be able to head the ball out back against the wall. That might be your target. Or you actually bring the ball down, and if you go back to the one about juggling earlier on, now you've actually got an opportunity to actually bring the ball down on your first touch and then strike the ball in and play in between the lines, in between the markers again. But everything that you're doing is with purpose, and it's always about not just defending to win the ball, but it's defending to actually get a successful outcome and linking those things together all the time.
Yeah, one of the interesting ones there is you mentioned heading, and I think one of the differences between the very, very top players is that when they're heading defensively, it's not just heading the ball, but it's heading it for what the next action might look like as well. So rather than just head to clear, it might be head to hit a player's feet and release them, and potentially even off a wall, we start to set up things like, well, it's going to come back off the wall and we're going to head it, but then maybe try and head it into a bucket or something like that, right? So there's some real direction behind all these different bits. And then the other thing I was going to mention there is, so you've got a goalkeeper, and we didn't have a goalkeeper in some of the earlier sessions, but I guess off the one that you had on first touch earlier, and then Mark Birighitti obviously talked about the passing range of goalkeepers being so important these days. Any of these sessions can be adapted to any position, including the goalkeeper, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you think about what are the roles and responsibilities of the individuals in each of the positions, and then you relate it back to a goalkeeper. A goalkeeper obviously has the ability to be able to use their hands and their feet. So how do you actually build that into your sessions and ensure that with those successful outcomes that you're looking for, it might be, if it's a goalkeeper and you're looking to improve their handling, it's going to be a driven pass into their hands. It might be into the chest. It might be into a low position where they have to force them to make a save, etc. So everything that you can do, it doesn't have to have the goalkeeper in a goal to save a shot, but what are the roles and responsibilities? And if you are a goalkeeper, you can adapt any of these sessions to include those goalkeeping actions as well, and would certainly encourage, well, what are your distribution mechanisms as a goalkeeper? So are you actually, once you've made the save, once you've taken your first touch with your feet, is it a driven low pass? Is it a lofted pass? Is it into an area, to your point earlier on? Is it into a bucket or a target area? You can work on so much stuff, but it has to have a successful outcome at the end of it. It can't just be for the sake of it.
Yeah, well, obviously, so these ones are all from a number 9, as you mentioned. So I guess, first of all, you just look at the sort of common denominators in all 3 goals, because all 3 look different, but there's some common themes. So first one being the positioning of where, as Kyogo is, isn't it, when the move starts and how he positions himself. So a defender, and you can even see it in this screen here. So one of the centre-backs, so this one is the one between him and the ball, can never see him and the ball. So the defenders are constantly having to readjust to see where he is. So, that position is key. The aggressive runs in all 3 of them, as soon as there's a player that's able to deliver a pass into where he wants it, he's aggressive with it. He's going full whack, trying to get into that sort of space beyond the defenders as much as he can. And you looked at both of them, when all 3 of them, I think he gets it across a defender at some stage. So to make it, the defender, have to make the decision about whether he tries to basically bring him down or he just has to let him go. And then you've got the bit about how all 3 of them, and I think you'll find, if you look at the majority of goals, there's a significant amount that's scored in what we call like the goal scoring zone, which is if you just take 2 straight lines, put them just outside the posts, bring them back to around the penalty spot, you create a box around the goal. I don't know the exact stats around it, but the amount of goals that are scored in that zone, and then with a first touch finish, is crazy, right?
Yeah. And links to what Lloyd Owusu talked about as well, right? We watched that video of him, and the majority of goals, is not to say they all are, but the majority of goals are scored with 1 or 2 touches, and they're scored inside the 18-yard box. So I think when we look at this one, they're probably in terms of a typical practice when people go to work on their finishing. I sometimes think to myself, maybe it's not so much a finishing practice, it's just a shooting practice. So we try to be a scorer of great goals, whereas, you know, the other way might be to be a great scorer of goals. So if you're going to be able to score 20 with 1 and 2 touch from inside the box, it's going to be more valuable as a player than scoring 1 20-yarder. Which isn't to say don't practice longer range or anything as well, but it is around understanding that the actual demands of the game and what needs practice. Because while these ones do look easy, they're also easy to either not be there or not be able to finish, because they need to be taken quickly and they need to be taken accurately.
You look at the great goal scorers, that they all just get tap-ins for fun. That's where they are. And it's just true. If you just knock back to that last slide quickly, before we go into this, like this one with the change of direction of the run. So we always talk about aggressive runs, getting beyond, but the change of direction, and this one in particular, he has 2 different changes of direction. I think the first one he has 1, and the second one the third one he has 1. This one he has 2. And it's important to know why he changes direction. And if you look at this still here, it's really good, because you can look at the defender's hips. And I'm sure this was one of the cues he was looking at, is that as soon as the defender turns his hips to adjust his run to try and block and try and make sure that you can't cut the defender off with your run, that's the time then to change his run again and see if the defender's good enough to swivel and come with you. And it really gives your attacking partner who's got the ball something to aim at.
Yeah, excellent. And we talk a lot for defenders about trying to keep player and ball in your view. And so that changes of direction, running off shoulders, going off the shoulder, then back across, or running in front, then just ducking back in behind it. It makes it really difficult. And again, it's as much a part of these goals as actually winding up with the ball in the back of the net. Because if you just take the final moment of all of them, their first touch finishes from within 3, 6, and 10 yards of the goal. So talk us through this in terms of you've set up 3 situations here. What are they, and how do they help us improve?
So going back to Warren's point right at the start about, so what I did was I looked at the 3 goals on those videos, and I basically just tried to recreate them, because I was thinking from a number 9, so how can I make myself like Kyogo and be able to finish there? Obviously it's a bit past me now, but you know, hopefully some of the guys on this call can recreate it. So the top left one is basically just a version of the first goal. Really, it goes out wide. Now the big brown thing there is your wall. Okay, so if you've got a wall, great. Okay, so, or if a rebound or anything. So all I've got, the white ones represent some cones and the black ones represent the goal. So like Drew, like Warren, everyone said, you know, could be jumpers, could be trainers put down, anything to give you some sort of a reference point. So the first one is just a simple, just bang it into the wall, get round some sort of, the white ones, the balls. Sorry, I said that wrong. The white ones are the balls, yellow ones are your markers or your trainers, whatever you're using. So the white one, so he's just banged it against the wall. He's made a run around the cone or the trainer, whatever, and then he's darted back in to try and meet the ball more or less in the middle of the goal and looking for a first-time finish. Now, obviously, you know, you can adjust the position of the cone, or you can adjust the position in relation to the wall. You know, so these are little things you can do, but it's just important that you get that change of direction. You meet the ball first time finish in front of some sort of goal or target. You know, you don't even need to use jumpers for goalposts. You could put some footballs down in a row and have to think, I need to try and make sure I hit those footballs with my first time finish. And then if you look into the bottom left, so next one, that's the second goal. So that's with your two changes of direction. Now you have to be pretty quick by yourself, but you can obviously, as I say, adjust your position in relation to the wall, adjust your little markers that you're getting around, but it's got those 2 little changes of direction. Now that last change of direction's got to be so you can just quickly nip in and meet the ball. Okay, and I've put the wall on the different side, but obviously you can flick between which side you have the wall. It doesn't really matter. Okay, but I would recommend doing it from both sides, because it can be it's a very hard finish when the ball's coming across you. So yeah, it's very different when the ball's coming from your left as opposed to when the ball's coming from your right. And thirdly, I've just got the one, so to recreate that third goal. So I just banging it into the wall, just doing a step forward and then turning and going and trying to get to that ball before it obviously gets to the goal, or a goalkeeper would come out and look for a different finish. And like you've mentioned, you can do, these don't have to be on the floor, they can be in the air. I would definitely try and recreate it in all different scenarios, right up in the air, half volleys on the floor, because as a striker, it's never going to be, it never comes that easy. You've just got to, you have to adapt to where the ball's going to be, and you have to then find a way to get it into the net.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the, as we go across this next one, but I'll ask you this as we go, is it always finish it the same way, or is it, if you're saying to yourself, right, I'm going to finish this one first time, is it just finding a part of the foot that you can get it to the goal? Is it practicing with all different bits, or is it, what's your thoughts there?
I think you've got to have an idea of how you would like to finish it. If you watch the flight of the ball, particularly as it comes off the wall, or as your partner in these ones here plays the ball in, you have to see the flight of the ball, and then you have to get your body into some sort of position that you can get it. Now, you can have your favourite way of finishing, but as I said, you've got to adapt to where the ball is. There was a good one, I think the other day, was it England, and Harry Kane had to header it a really awkward way, but he found a way. And no one's going to complain if it comes off your knee if it goes in the goal, right?
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the things, that if you commit, say, to a front post run, sometimes you're going to be running and it's not going to come exactly where you want it to. So it might be that it needs to go with your toe, it might be with the outside of your foot. I'm certainly seen Jamie McLaren in the past sort of go with kind of somewhat of a Cruyff turn sort of finish behind their foot. Ultimately, you need to try and get the ball on target, right? So some of these things, replicating a little bit of chaos is probably a good thing.
100%. The near post, like you said, the near post runs, the amount of times it comes in around your knees and stuff, and it's awkward as hell. But you've got to practice for that, and you've got to be able to adjust to it.
Brilliant. So talk us through these ones and how having the extra player here changes the practice and what extra it can give us.
Yeah. So look, I brought our friend in as instead of the wall for the first two practices, just basically because I thought that would help the attacker time their runs and time the change of direction a little bit better or easier. But you could easily they could easily be a goalkeeper, they could easily be chucked in as a defender. If you go back to the first slide, you could easily chuck them in as the keeper or as a defender to try and mark that run. There's nothing says he has to be the one that plays the ball in. I think it's important. I think with the third one where I used him as a goalkeeper, I think that's important because when you're running onto a ball that's come over your shoulder or come around the side of you, you go from looking over your shoulder to in front, and you've got to be able to see where the keeper is and where he's coming. You've got to be able to see it quickly, and you've got to be able to react to that to then play the ball past them. Because you go one-on-one, you don't get that many opportunities in a game, and you have to take them if you're going to be a lethal striker.
Yeah, I mean, a great example of that. I said it. The Mobile one from the other day, ball came over his shoulder. His first touch brings it down from about hip height, but his second touch is the shot that he gets away because the goalkeeper's coming so quickly. And it's hard to replicate those moments without the pressure. And sometimes all that's required is just to maybe just even deviate the ball with a toe past the goalkeeper, but you're not going to know where they are maybe without them there. And that's also realistic. That's a realistic scenario as well for the goalkeepers who are practicing, right? Those are the things they're going to want to try and get there, or do they come, do they not come, and how do they make themselves big?
Exactly. And the other thing the goalkeepers will bring to the practice is that you allow yourself, it gives the striker the opportunity for feints, because often the little sort of shudder or drop of the shoulder, little draw back of the foot quickly will make the keeper react, and then you can then obviously then react to that and go the different way or chip them or however you want to do it. And I just want to add as well with any of these practices, I think someone mentioned earlier, the visualization is key. and actually sort of putting yourself in that game mindset. And that, you know, this isn't just practice so much, but it's, you know, you've got to visualize different defenders, people on the sideline, so on, and bring that into your practice as much as you can.
Yeah, exactly. And look, after we'll go through this next video first, but then we'll come back to Warren to talk about how we can link some of these sessions to the IDPs. And I think that bit of visualization and also how it fits into the tactical and the physical is so important. So Warren, if we come across to you and just thinking about the sessions we've seen, but also the fact that obviously all the players have their IDPs, which is them and the positions that they might play, but also then thinking about, we've mostly talked around technical, but there's also the tactical, physical, psychosocial. How do they start to sort of pull these things all together?
Yeah, so I think everything that we've talked about tonight has pretty much been on the the technical side of the game. And then if you look at the bigger picture, it then lends itself to the tactical component as well. So if we talk about first touch, we talk about defending, striking the ball, passing, finishing, dribbling, and again, talking about getting successful outcomes. Just watching that video back then, how often does a player on their first touch take it with the inside of their foot? On their second touch, change the controlling surface? If you look at yourself as an individual right now and you're on your journey as a player and where you're at, how often have you put yourself from a visualization point of view and gone, right, today when I walk out onto the pitch, and we can't do that right now, but when I walk out onto the pitch, how many successful outcomes am I going to get based on first touch, finishing, dribbling with the ball, but doing something with purpose, defending, getting myself into good positions, etc. So when you dig into the detail of your IDPs, try to drill a little bit deeper and think about each of those 4, potentially 5 corners when you look at the psychosocial side. But is there something in the technical area that you've seen as a deficiency, something you know you need to work on? Is there something that is your super strength, so something that you actually do really, really well? So how do you build on that super strength and the thing that you do really, really well, and how do you link it to the next component? And how do you actually make sure you get that successful outcome? Then from that technical aspect, how does that then build into the technical side as well? And then how do you ensure there's part of the collective and the team, you start to develop yourself as well? So even right now in the current situation or climate that we're actually in, we can't train with multiple amounts of players. We can only either train on our own or with a friend or with a parent or guardian. So how do you actually build that environment around you where it does replicate the games, or as close to as possible replicating the game? And then how do you actually build that into your IDP as well? What was great there in terms of that physical component, I think they're all connected and they have to be. So when you're actually looking at going out and actually doing your individual training on your own, what's the physical output that will lend itself to you improving technically and then tactically as well as part of that collective as well? What's the type of runs that you've made? Phil and Andrew have talked in great detail about the change of direction, how long to run, the distance of the run, etc. So when you're actually setting your sessions up, are you getting lots of repetition, but that physical output that will actually support the football action? And as your football actions start to go down when you become tired, how do you actually record that and mark that? So it's not just training for training's sake. You're actually going to give yourself a challenge today. My challenge today is that I want to get X amount of finishes. I want to get X amount of really good, high quality first touches into positions where I can face forward. I want to be able to dribble into areas or change direction, whatever it may be, and only do 2 or 3. It doesn't have to be a massive amount, but give yourself a real opportunity to improve and record it and mark it down, because the very, very best that go on to the top level will dedicate themselves to those 1%ers to make sure that they give themselves the edge, that when an opportunity does present, they will step into the next level because they have the attributes of all of these 4 corners. So I think it's really important to actually, ensure that you get as much detail down as possible. And to start with, it might start off slowly and you only do a little bit, and then you just build it out, but keep a journal of what you're doing as well. But most importantly, keep it fun as well. Try to give yourself a challenge, put some fun elements in there, either on your own or like we say, with a friend or your parent or guardian, etc. So there's so much that you can actually do, but always go back to this in terms of your own individual development, and then also link it to footage at the top level, even in NPL level. A lot of you will have games that have recorded, your parents would have recorded, your guardians would have recorded, games that have been provided to you from your NPL club or environment, and go into that detail as well and have a look at what you've done previously and how you can slowly start to build yourself up as an individual to support the collective outcome.
Yeah, when I look at, for example, there is one, like, if we look at the finishing video, if we look at that physical demands video, the amount of goals that are scored from something being slid in behind the defenders who can't quite get there, and a striker gets a tap in. But how often do we ever see people practicing, say as centre backs or full backs, you're jogging backwards because you want to be able to go forwards, then turning, sprinting, and then trying to block a low cross, but not just block it, but actually clear it away from where it's coming. So that's a key competency of defenders that I would suggest is very, very rarely actually practiced. It's a lot of defending people running at you, or a lot of heading things away that have come at you. But when you're running back towards your own goal as quick as you can and it gets slid between you and the goal, have you practiced some different ways to, do you know when you can swivel your hips and get it away? Do you know when you might just have to actually poke it past your own post? Sometimes you're going to have to go up over the top of your own crossbar. And if the first time you're having to come up with that decision is the moment that the ball's fizzing across your 6-yard box, you probably haven't prepared yourself for the demands of the game. So, I think things like that, if the kids are really, really looking at the game, tying it into these different bits, there's a real opportunity, not just in COVID, but we know that even outside of COVID, they're getting their 6-10 hours of practice in. Is it as meaningful as it can be? Because it can't just be, we'll just go practice more like they do in Brazil or like they do in Germany or whatever, because the reality is there's other things to life other than football that lots of them are doing that prevent it happening, and that's fine. So we just got to be as purposeful as we can with the practice that we do have.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look to the game tomorrow night, we're lucky that it's on a relatively good time, 10 o'clock. And if you was to watch that game, I'd be encouraging everyone that's on this call now, what's the position you're currently playing in, or you see yourself as your best position? What are the types of individual football actions that these players are doing, whether it's based on any of the ones that we've talked about this evening, or there are other things that you see as deficiencies potentially, or again, your super strength for the areas that you're really, really competent in, that link into each of those as well. Jot as many of those down, and then try to be creative with designing a session that's going to give you opportunities to get lots of repetition, but it's realistic and it's relevant to what you want to achieve, depending on each of these 4 corners that we're talking to in terms of your individual development plans.